Mount up, chrome fiends and shovelheads. We're cruising back in time, baby, to the decade of neon, spandex, and motorcycles so loud they rattled Reagan's dentures. That's right, we're talking the 1980s, the golden age of Harley Davidson. Yeah, the 80s weren't just about leg warmers and hairspray. They were about freedom, rebellion, and two wheels of American steel cutting through the wind. And Harley Davidson, they were the kings of the road, pumping out iconic machines that defied a generation. But with so many legendary bikes from that era, where do you even begin? Well, strap on your chaps and hold on tight because we're looking at 5 iconic motorcycles that made the 80s roar. From the stripped-down aggression of the FXR to the chrome-soaked majesty of the Tour Glide, we're separating the hogwash from the Holy Grail. We'll talk performance, style, impact, and even throw in some juicy tidbits along the road. So fire up your VCRs, crack open a can of Tab, and get ready to relive the glory days of American Iron. This ain't your grandpa's Harley video, folks. This is a high-octane ride through a decade that redefined freedom on 2 wheels. Hit that subscribe button now and smash that like button. Let's roll. (1980) FLT Tour Glide. In 1980, Harley Davidson released an all-new version of its premier Grand American touring machine, the FLT 80 Tour Glide. Consumers and magazines lauded the FLT's ability to look like a Harley while providing performance suited for crunching huge miles. Starting with some motor company staples, an 80 cubic inch V-twin shovelhead engine, 16-inch tires, low seat height, the Tour Glide introduced a host of new features for 1980. The FLT Tour Glide was known for its comfortable touring capabilities. It featured a full fairing, hard saddlebags, and a smooth ride. Riders appreciated its long-distance cruising ability and the powerful V-twin engine. The FLT was a classic touring bike that embodied the spirit of adventure on the open road. The major new pieces included a frame with none of the cast junctions used on previous Harley frames, a rubber-mounted engine to reduce vibration, 5-speed transmission, fully enclosed final drive chain, larger triple disc brakes, frame-mounted fairing, instrument cluster mounted on the forks rather than on the gas tank. One of the most noticeable changes to the machine in 1980 was its rubber engine mounts. The powertrain was held by a rubber biscuit at the front of the engine and at the swing arm pivots on the frame. They were adjustable locating links at the front of the motor and at the top of the motor. Changes to the motor included improved valve and valve seat materials for longer life, a new exhaust system that was quieter than previous exhaust and allowed the engine to develop more power, the addition of a spin-on oil filter, and electronic ignition with electronically controlled ignition advance. The spin-on oil filter mounts behind the engine where it's easy to change and unobtrusive. The ignition, manufactured by Magnavox, used Hell effect magnetic triggering and incorporated a microprocessor to advance the ignition of a maximum of 32 degrees at 1600 RPM. And who says Harley Davidsons aren't cutting edge? Stopping the FLT was less of an adventure than on previous big Harleys. There were double 10-inch discs in the front and a single 12-inch on the back that used a double piston caliper. What gave the big HD touring machines their distinctive appearance in 1980 was its accessories. As much as anything else, the FLT sports a whole bunch of new fiberglass and ancillary items. The fairing was a frame mount design with a dual round headlamp. There were locking covers over storage compartments on the fairing and room for gauges and a radio speaker accessory package with CB option that fits at the base of the windshield. Saddlebags were detachable and shaped differently so they can clear the rear-mounted battery that was moved from behind the engine. The King Tour Pack rear box now hinges from the side so it can be opened with a passenger seat aboard the bike. The standard seat mounted directly to the frame for a lower seat height rather than a single post on previous Electroglide models. The new 5-gallon gas tank was made in one piece and doesn't have the speedometer mounted in the middle. Its gauges mount in an instrument cluster in front of the handlebars. Included were a speedometer, tachometer, voltmeter, and warning lights. The ignition switch mounted at the steering head includes an integral fork lock. Floorboards accompanied by a huge brake pedal and heel-to-toe shifter remain. But the floorboards were no longer spring-mounted to reduce vibration, as the rubber engine takes care of that task. The heel and toe shifter was made in 2 pieces, so the heel and toe sections can be adjusted separately to suit the rider, a common feature even to this day. The FLT expanded Harley Davidson's touring line offering for 1980. It stayed in continuous production for every model year during the decade and beyond until 1996. After a brief rest, it re-emerged as the Road Glide in the twin can era, and today is Harley Davidson's leading touring chassis model in sales. In 1980, the FLT had a list price of $6,013. Adjusted for inflation, that's $22,235.11. Today, the Road Glide Standard with a 107 cubic inch Milwaukee 8 power plant starts at $21,999. So good job, Harley. You're right where you need to be.
Still alive out there?
Good.
Headroom. Max headroom.
Remember
Boy George? Well, no, me neither. Hey, how you doing? Come on, sit down. What do you say to coffee? Oh, no, I'll get it.
1983 XR1000. The XR1000 was a limited production model inspired by Harley's dirt track racing bikes. It featured a high-performance engine, dual exhaust, and a racing-style fairing. The XR1000 appealed to riders who wanted a taste of vintage racing heritage. 1983's XR1000 was the alternative to the XLH61 for those who were more into the look of a cafe racer and didn't mind paying a premium price. It cornered the market on aesthetics, and although sales weren't as high for this model as they were for the stripped-down Sportster, there were a few who shelled out the $7,000 retail price. As a tribute to the flat track success of the Harley Davidson XR750, the motor company offered the limited edition XR1000 Sportster. The XR cylinder heads, specially prepared by Jerry Branch, were all alloy and feature bigger valves than the XL Sportsters. To accommodate the larger valves, intake ports were moved to the right side and exhaust ports were on the left. Because the XR1000 cylinder heads were larger than the stock cast iron heads, the cylinder barrels were shortened to fit into the Sportster frame. A pair of 36mm Del Orto carbs brought the power output to 70 horsepower, dipping quarter-mile times under 13 seconds. The XR1000 weighed in at 490 pounds. Top speed was 125 miles per hour. Dual 11-inch front brake rotors supplied the best stopping power yet. Other features included 9-spoke cast wheels and a 2.5-gallon gas tank. It's been reported that 1,018 XR1000s were released in 1983, the lowest production of any Sportster model that year.
Max! What I want to know is, why are the only funny lines on this show the ones behind me?
1984 FXRDG. The FXRDG Disc Glide was a custom cruiser with a unique design. It had a disc rear wheel, paint-implanted graphics, and a low-strung profile. The FXRDG was all about style and individuality. Dubbed the Willie G Special by enthusiasts, Harley Davidson's Disc Glide was a high-glitter, first-year 80-inch Evo-equipped limited edition machine with a reported production of under 850 units. Enthusiasts who bought these up were called disc groupies. Its low numbers were aided by California's strict emission laws of 1984, as the Disc Glide wasn't available for sale in California. At the time, Harley Davidson had the flexibility to run off small batches of machines. These motorcycles weren't marketed to be limited editions, but rather a tribute to Harley's ability to assemble special detail models in small numbers for bike models capable of higher retails, and the FXRDG was a premium model in the FXR line for 1984, with a price tag of $81.99. The most obvious trait of the Disc Glide was its rear wheel disc with a wire spoke wheel supporting things up front. The more common FXRS and FXRT models had cast wheels. Visual concerns dictated the Disc Glide's rather eclectic wheel fashion. The motorcycle was supposed to look light and airy toward the front and dense and weighted down at the rear. The disc wheel was a composite, two halves joined by rivets. The disc wheel lacks any functional advantage over a standard cast wheel. In fact, you must run a tube in the rear tire with the disc wheel, and at 15 pounds the disc weighs 2 pounds more than the standard FXRS cast piece. Functional superiority was not where the FXRDG was at. Function had little to do with the 12 chrome plated aluminum engine covers. Again, a testimony to the importance of finish. Further setting the FXRDG apart was the paint-implanted graphics. Rather than surface or decal badging, what you see on the side of the FXRDG tank was not a decal. Instead, Harley Davidson used a process in which the graphic design was implanted into the paint and covered by clear coats. There were no decal ridges, a first for Harley at the time. The Disc Glide was offered in a colorway which had the restraint of a banker's furnishings, black, burgundy, and gold, with black and brown leather saddle, and was tame stuff compared to the 1980 Y Glide with flames on its tank. For 1984, the FXRS had some ergo changes, and the FXRDG was included. The seat height went down to 26.8 inches, lower by more than an inch from the earlier FXRS models. In the front, suspension travel remains unchanged. The tubes went shorter and the bike's triple crowns ride lower than before. In the back, the new lower riding strategy results in a shorter rear shock and the loss of 3/4 of an inch of travel. The low ride ground clearance sacrificed the comfort and suspension control longer travel can provide, but less athletic and less experienced riders felt more secure when they can get their feet flat on the ground as they come to a stop, and that was a key to more bike sales. Harley Davidson worked hard to get a contemporary motorcycle to the market in the early 1980s, and they had to. The latest burst of Japanese engineering activity that came on the scene had only served to raise the general threshold of contemporary technology higher, and Harley used every tactical advantage to keep the FXR series fresh in the eyes of the consumer. Harley Davidson gave their faithful what they needed in terms of fit and finish in exchange for thousands of additional dollars that were all spent on the FXRDG FXRP over the base FXR. In 1989, Harley laid the FXR to rest for good with the release of the first custom vehicle operations, or CVO model, the FXR3. It was a limited production model and the last chapter for the FXR. Its lower rear stance was inspired by the 1984 FXRDG.
Side, inhale out. Oh yeah, let me turn you upside down, all the way.
And I got a kind of...
Oh, get ready to dance.
1983 XLX61. The XLX61 was a Sportster model with a 61 cubic inch engine. It combined the agility of a sport bike with classic Harley styling. The XLX61 was a bike favored by riders who preferred a sport bike that had the appearance of a Sportster that had been stripped bare. It was offered at a pared down price too, $3,999, $3,000 less than the performance-leading XR1000 Sportster of that year. The XLX61 was aimed towards the daring biker who liked to push the limits of barely street legal. It was an excellent choice if you wanted a road racer that could be ridden on the road without the threat of penalty to your bank account or the popo. The XLX61 was clearly one of Harley Davidson's great marketing moves of the 1980s. The entry-level no-frills XLX61 came bare bones with a solo seat, peanut gas tank, and a single-gauge speedometer. If you like black, you were in luck, as that was the only color offered in 1983. In its first year, a total of 4,892 XLX60 models were sold. That was more than the 3 other Sportster models combined, making the XLX61 one of the best-selling Sportster models in history. 1985 FXRP. In the 1980s, the ad copy said the new FXR Super Glide 2 was a Harley Davidson that would separate the men from the boys. The implication being that boys were riding foreign motorcycles. The FXR promised to deliver handling to rival sporty bikes from overseas and the potent performance of an American V-twin. Even to this day, there are still riders who claim the FXR was the best motorcycle Harley ever built. The FXRP was part of the Harley Davidson Police Series. It was designed for law enforcement use. Its sturdy build, reliable performance, and distinctive police livery made it stand out. The FXRP was a workhorse, serving officers on patrol duty across the country. The chrome pieces were substituted with matte black paint, making them look more official and less flashy. Precision handling and the ultimate in comfort were the features that made the 1985 FXRP such a special bike with dual front disc and Defender side bags. The FXRP grew out of the FXRT Sport Glide, a sport touring bike equipped with a frame-mounted fairing and hard bags that were originally designed for the Nova, a liquid-cooled V4 project that was abandoned for lack of funding after the AMF buyout in 1982. The deep scoops on the side were developed in a wind tunnel to feed air to the Nova's underseat radiator. On the FXRT, they became vents to the rider. The FXRP police model transitioned to the V2 Evolution engine with a low-maintenance belt final drive in 1985. You can ask any officer that rode a 1985 FXRP how well they liked it. It was a special customized design taken from the inspiration of that popular FXR and decked out for use by the police force. It was one heck of a touring bike, but the police variation came with panniers, a special windscreen, ties, and floorboards to make it suitable for law enforcement. The FXRP was an important model for Harley in their quest to show the world they were still relevant after buying out AMF's ownership interest, and to compete with the Japanese, it had to counter the dominance of the Kawasaki KZ1000 in police forces with the FXRP. Today, FXRPs are highly sought after by classic bike enthusiasts and vintage resto mod bike builders. The FXRP's influence can also be found in today's modern Dyna and M8 Softail bikes, where the Police Defender style bags and FXRT fairing are commonly added to Sport Glides, Street Bobs, and Lowrider models by their owners to accessorize their bikes for touring while giving a genuine nod to Harley's past. This trend led to Harley Davidson releasing its own updated version of the FXRT and FXRP, the Lowrider ST, in 2022. The Lowrider ST is Harley Davidson's first non-touring chassis bike to have a frame-mounted fairing since the FXRP was discontinued. So there you have it, folks, the 5 Harley Davidsons that made the 1980s scream rubber and spit chrome. From the raw muscle of the XR1000 to the kingly swagger of the FLT Tour Glide, these bikes just weren't machines, they were statements. They were freedom on 2 wheels, middle fingers to the conformity, and testaments to American grit. The 80s might be gone, but these bikes, well, they're timeless. They're legends of the asphalt, testaments to an era when chrome ruled the road and wind whistled through your soul. So next time you see a classic Harley from that golden age, remember the stories it carries, the wind it devoured, and the dreams it chases. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey Kenny, where's my 80s Harley? Well, that's for you to decide, y'all. Leave a comment below, tell me which bike rocked your world back then, and let's keep the rumble of these legends alive. Hit that subscribe button, share this video with your fellow gearheads, and keep the spirit of the 80s riding strong. Until next time, stay greasy, stay free, and ride like the wind owes you something. My name's Kenny Quest, and I'll see you on the next one. Fact: built from reclaimed parts that ended the original bike's life in a fiery crash in the 1970s, the Harley Owners Group paid for the reconstruction of Lucifer's hammer in 1984, using an XR1000 power plant that ended the Italian reign of Ducati in AMA's Battle of the Twin Series in Daytona.